What is happening, everyone? My name is Phil with Think Make Do, and on today's episode we are making a Murphy bed. Now this is not your typical Murphy bed because we are using essentially the cheapest parts we could find on Amazon for the hinge system, and we're doing a horizontal Murphy bed, not a vertical Murphy bed. Now there's a couple nuances there. Most hinge systems are designed to handle the load vertically, so you're talking about a twin or a full-size bed coming down like this. I'm talking about a bed coming down kind of sideways, which has a different type of load. This one in particular that we got off of Amazon can do both horizontal and vertical, but with any good, cheap part off of Amazon, there are no instructions, and more importantly, there is no diagram for how you're supposed to attach the plates against the walls of your Murphy bed. So I'm gonna have to try and figure that out on my own. This essentially, the instructions I have here really don't explain anything. There's a couple pictures, no dimensions for relative placement of our hinge system. Now, this Amazon system comes with the legs here that will go on the end of the bed to help hold things up. And they also come with a hinge system like this. And I think, well, I don't really know, but I think maybe it goes vertically like this. This is stationary and this thing twists like this. Now, there are two different types of Murphy bed systems really out there on the market. One is a collection of loaded springs like this one. There are 5 springs or 4 springs inside here which handle the load. And there's gas strut systems where the gas strut is what handles the load. Anyway, this is the spring version. So I'm gonna get started by building out my basic frame that I'm gonna have that fits my bed size. I'm gonna leave enough space for this hardware to mount in between, a little extra space for the comforter and everything else to sit inside there. And then we're gonna figure out where this bad boy goes and, I don't know, see if it works. Let's get going. Alrighty, look at my plans. Aren't they beautiful? Just kidding. I do have this on SketchUp. I'll show you kind of a design mock-up right now, but the typical size for a horizontal Murphy bed is 16 inches deep, about 63 inches tall, and 81 inches wide. So I needed to first model this all out in SketchUp so I got a good visual of what I was working on. I had tried to do this by paper and it wasn't making quite enough sense to me, so I resorted to 3D modeling to clarify my design. The first thing I did was create the outer frame that the Murphy bed was going to rest in, and figured out my overall dimensions based on the size of my bed, including the Murphy bed springs and everything else I wanted to include in it. And I got to my outer box. I then started to create the support for all of the frame to make the box square, and that's because I didn't want to have just 3/4 paneling throughout, because that would make an incredibly heavy piece of furniture that would be very difficult to move. So I created somewhat of an exoskeleton, right? The sides were solid pieces 3/4, the top was 3/4, but then the back just had braces where it was necessary, not along the entire structure. And that I found was going to be good enough for support. And then I got to work on the bed frame itself, and that's actually pretty difficult because I've never done a rotating object before. However, some Googling and learning about components and objects in SketchUp Pro allowed me to figure out how to do rotation for the first time using this bed frame as my platform. And here I'm just building out the bed frame's outer supports to make sure that I have enough spacing in between for those hinges. And I'm getting the placement and figuring out how tall I want the starting point of that rotation to be. And this is tricky because once it rotates out, those legs that come with the kit need to be able to sit somewhere where it is somewhat parallel, so you get a good flat surface when you're fully extended. And then when you rotate back up into the platform, everything comes to a close with good tolerance and clearance so that there's minimal gaps between your frame and the bed platform. I think you can see here, this is somewhat the final design. I actually lowered the bed platform about 3 or 4 inches from the bottom and made that the rotation point so I could put some shelves up top, and that's where the pillows and blankets will go for the Murphy bed for when guests need I guess, bedding supplies. And that means that I have just like this little thing at the bottom. You can call it a footer or a kick plate, if you will. And then you'll find later in the video that I didn't even have room for the kick plate. I had to get rid of it because I had mismeasured, even based on these drawings. All right, let's do a quick status check on where we're at before we get into the next section here. I've got my corners connected, glued and screwed, and I'm using a pocket hole jig, obviously not very well. It's actually my first time using one, so the depth on some of these isn't quite right to hide the screws, but I think I'm gonna either paint over this or laminate over this surface, so it'll be okay. So I got both sides done. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to establish kind of the perimeter structure to make this square rigid, or to make sure it is square, right? If you look here, you can see some slight bowing of the plywood on this one as well. This one's pretty straight, but maybe just on that one. So I'm going to get my top strip that goes in the back here all the way across. I'm going to get my back strip here all the way across, and then stand this up so I can establish square, and then figure out the inner structure where the bed frame itself is going to go, to figure out how to make that too, and go from there. So let's get to work. Take a look at what we've done here. I've got a mock-up because I don't know exactly where all this is supposed to go. There's no instructions. So I just took a piece of scrap and I put it roughly where I think this is supposed to go. I've been using essentially this pivot point here. I'm kind of estimating where I want this thing to rotate in relation to, I guess, the back wall. And the good thing is, with a 16-inch deep cavity, pretty much no matter where you put this pivot point, you're not going to hit the back wall when the rest of your bed kind of swings out. And because it's such a long distance, this radius, you're not really going to have too many problems with this top section up here catching
as this whole thing swings out. So I've got it attached here just with 2 screws out of the 3. I've just got 4 of the 8 screws here, and I'm going to at least put this out here, or connect it for now, just to see where we're at. So linked in. There's a little thingy somewhere. This U-shaped bolt to lock me in position. Alright, I think these bolts are actually a little long. Maybe they came like that intentionally. I gotta back this one out or else it interacts with the plate. So now this thing should come down. Go. Okay. So I don't know. It works. I think these bolts need to be shaved down to be specific to my implementation. That's fair. And now I've got all 3 in. Look at that. Just it's pretty good. So I think I'm gonna leave it like this for tonight. I'll go ahead and replicate the same thing on the other side. What I have to now do is measure my bed, figure out how I'm going to build my frame, make sure that I am covering my gaps on my outermost piece, and then I have to decide how far up I want my bottom footer to go. Obviously I cut this a little extra long just for testing, but I think about a 4 or 5 inch block here will work best.